and welcome to Favourite Book. Hello everyone, I thought I would share with you my favourite book. Because I'm doing the favourite book series on the channel, I thought I would just sit down and share with you what my favourite book is. So the first episode in this series is actually up, it's with Graham, and it's so funny because we just laughed through the whole thing. I absolutely adore that video, so I'm going to leave it down below. And I thought I would just share what is my favourite book. So my favourite book is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This is the book that got me into reading, and that's why it's personally my favourite book. It was originally published in 1880 when Mary Shelley was 20 years old. And the plot of this is about a mad scientist called Victor Frankenstein. And he wants to create the perfect human. So he gets all body parts that he thinks is perfect. So hair as black as a raven and all these different things. He then puts all the body parts together, sews them together, and brings this creature to life that is referred to in the book as the monster. And then he spends the whole book running away from the monster. The monster comes to life and he realises that all these perfect features that he thought would work so well together don't. They actually look horrendous together, and this creature is frightening to him, and so he abandons the monster as soon as the monster is born. The monster then spends the whole book trying to track down Victor Frankenstein and get his revenge for his abandonment. And Victor Frankenstein spends the whole book travelling around trying to get away from the monster. We have one chapter in the book which is told from the monster's point of view. The rest of it is told from Victor Frankenstein. So the actual creation of the monster is just in the beginning of the book, and the majority of the book is Victor Frankenstein haunted by the image of this monster that he's brought to life and the guilt that he feels for bringing this hideous creature into the world, and him trying to run away from the creature. And the creature is trying to affect people in Victor Frankenstein's life to get his revenge for his original abandonment. So the monster is really Victor Frankenstein's child, and it's about abandonment. And I have some little facts that happened to Mary Shelley before she wrote this book that I thought were quite interesting, and they'll maybe why some of the themes are in the book. So first up, I'm sure a lot of people know the story that she was actually on holiday in Geneva with Percy Shelley and Lord Byron and some other friends, and Lord Byron said to them all, why don't we all try and write a ghost story? And then Mary Shelley had a dream that night, and she had a dream about this mad scientist creating this monster, and then she wrote the book Frankenstein. She started writing the book when she was 19 and she got it published when she was 20. Mary Shelley's own mother died from a result of childbirth with Mary Shelley. So her mother got something which is called puerperal fever, and that is an infection that you can only get after giving birth or after having a miscarriage, and it lasts about 10 days and you have a really high fever, and Mary Shelley's mother died of that. Mary Shelley's mother was actually very famous in her own right, so was her father. They were famous philosophers. But Mary Shelley, I think I'm telling you these facts because I think they really relate to her creating Frankenstein, because Frankenstein is about someone's creator fearing what they've created and wanting to get away from that for the whole book, and then the thing they've created killing them. And I feel that maybe Mary Shelley felt that about her own mother, that if her mother hadn't given birth to her, her mother would still be alive, and that in some weird way she had killed her mother because her mother had died of something that you only get after giving birth. Mary Shelley herself had a lot of tragedy in her life, but I'm only going to mention the tragedy that happened before she created Frankenstein, because she did have a lot of tragedy after Frankenstein, but that obviously didn't influence her writing the book. So I'm just going to talk about what happened before that. So her mother died in childbirth with her. She had a baby who died in 1815. She then had a son who survived, and then Percy Shelley, who was a famous poet, he was already married and he fell in love with Mary, and they had a baby, and that baby died. They then had a son together, but Percy Shelley was married to someone else, and Mary Shelley had to leave her father, who she loved very much, because her father was totally against the marriage. So her and Percy Shelley really went on the run together and ran away from everyone because everyone thought it was terrible. He was married, he was abandoning his wife and going off with this younger woman, but they were very much in love. And Percy Shelley's wife committed suicide after Mary Shelley and Percy had had a baby together. And that was in 1816, and then Frankenstein was published in 1818. So maybe the death of her own child did something to her, and then having a child who survived, and then the death of Percy's wife, the suicide there. There was a lot of tragedy, there was a lot of darkness already around her, and I think that must have really influenced Frankenstein. I mean, having a baby so young, so when her first baby died, that was in 1815, so she must be about 17 years old. She had a baby and that baby died. So bringing something into the world and then it dying, the tragedy that you feel about that. And Frankenstein is all about creation. It's all about someone bringing a monster into creation and then abandoning it. So someone bringing life into the world and then abandoning that life, or that life trying to kill them in return for the abandonment. So I think they are important things that you could go into kind of big lectures about, or write huge essays. I'm sure people have written huge essays about how Mary Shelley, the death of her mother via something that happens after childbirth, how that to do with creation, bringing in life, and then that life kind of killing you. And then Mary Shelley herself having a baby and that baby dying, how everything to do with that creation probably influenced her writing of Frankenstein. This book, why I like it, is I had to read it for GCSE. I was 15 years old. I didn't know I had dyslexia at the time. I thought reading just wasn't for me because I really struggled with it and I hated it. And we had to read this in class for our GCSEs and I loved it. I absolutely fell in love with it. The story, the atmosphere. There's one bit in it that is just one of my favourite book moments, and that is when Victor Frankenstein, he's in this hut and he is hiding from the monster, and there's this thunderstorm outside, and he looks outside and he sees two green glowing eyes, and it's the monster's eyes glowing in the dark, and it's so beautifully written. It will send shivers down your spine. I absolutely adore this book. I cannot recommend everyone read it and read it. I think it's amazing. It's the book that really made me think this is the book that I love. This, like, wow, if I can feel all these emotions from a book, which I had never felt those emotions from a book before, then maybe reading is this kind of magical thing that can make you have these visions within your mind by reading someone else's words. I think reading is very magical, to be perfectly honest with you. The fact that someone can sit in their house, write a book, I can read it, and everything that they wrote in their book I can visualise in my own head. I think there is some kind of magic to that, and that's why with this channel I want to do loads more about promoting reading, people talking about their favourite books. I love talking to people about their passions, so that's why I started the favourite book series, because I feel like when you talk about something someone loves doing and it's real passion for them, it's such a beautiful thing, because there is this spark that awakens within them and they just can't stop talking about it. So I thought I would do my own favourite book episode on my favourite book that I absolutely adore, which is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, the book that got me into reading. It's incredibly written as well, and it just, the way you can visualise everything because it's written so well. There are also things with abandonment and creation, and then the links to Mary Shelley's life I find very interesting. You know, people do write essays on that, and I just love it. I have actually seen the original Frankenstein manuscript that Mary Shelley wrote. It was at the English library and I actually went up there to go and see it, and it had in the margins Percy Shelley, who was her husband and a famous poet. He had written in the margins kind of notes and stuff, because people say that he collaborated with her on Frankenstein, but from what I could see in the notes there wasn't massive collaboration. It was something like an author and an editor would do. So before you can have your book published, you don't just write a book and then the publishers go, oh, this is perfect, we'll publish it. An editor will edit down your book and take out things that they don't want in it, or say, can you rewrite this passage, I think you could do this better, and they play around with the book. So I think that was the relation. I don't think it was a co-write. I think it was Mary Shelley wrote the book and Percy Shelley edited it. So he was the editor of it as opposed to the writer. It wasn't his vision or anything like that. It was her vision that brought the book to life. I have also read Matilda. Very interesting short story by Mary Shelley. If you read it, you'll know why I'm saying it like that. Kind of about incest. Kind of the weirdest thing ever, but it also has a thing to do with creation as well. That it's about a girl who, she doesn't know who her dad is, and then her dad turns up in her life and she has a relationship with him, but she in her mind has a romantic relationship with her dad and she wants to have a romantic relationship with him going forward. And it's kind of, she doesn't know she didn't know her dad, so she didn't know who her dad was. So when all of a sudden this man comes into her life and says that he is her dad, she doesn't know how to react because she's never had a father figure. She doesn't know how to react with a dad. What is the daughter-dad relationship? She doesn't know. She hasn't had it before. The only relationships she has had is romantic relationships. So of course she puts the idea of a romantic notion onto her dad, and she's not doing it to be sick and incestuous. She's doing it because that's all she's ever known, is that kind of relationship. Mary Shelley's books just go so much deeper into things about life, and that's why I think I love them so much, is they're not just a story. There is so much you can take out from it from life. And Victor Frankenstein is very much someone who is running from his problems, and the book is kind of saying you can't run from your problems. No matter what you do in life, no matter who you hurt, you can't run from that forever, because it will catch up with you. So there are deeper meanings within it, and there are things about, you know, abandonment. You can't abandon someone. That will come back to you. If you think you can walk away from a child or walk away from someone and abandon them, you can't do that, because that will come back and haunt you. Maybe in physical form, but maybe also in mental form, because Victor Frankenstein mentally is haunted by what he did, by abandoning the monster, but also what he did, which is recklessly creating something that he didn't know how it was going to work out. He just wanted to do it, but he didn't think of the consequence of his actions, and he was working at a morgue, and that's how he gets all the body parts together, and he thinks this human's going to be perfect because he's got all these perfect features that he considers the most beautiful things a person could have. So the most beautiful eyes, the most beautiful mouth, the most beautiful arms, everything is perfect, but when it's together it's not perfect. And maybe that's a bigger look at that we worry about the imperfections of our face, that our eyes might not be like completely correct. Like I have a bit of a lazy eye on this side, and I could spend my time worrying about this lazy eye, but that lazy eye with the rest of my face makes my face perfect, because we are all perfect in our own way. So if we hone in on the little imperfections and try and change them, we'll never be happy with that. You know, people become addicted to plastic surgery. Obviously back then Mary Shelley didn't know that we were going to be evolving into this culture that would become addicted to plastic surgery, but maybe she saw people honing on in their imperfections, and she was thinking, but your imperfections is what makes you who you are. It makes you your face. You can't technically have a perfect human, because there is nothing is imperfect. You are perfect just the way you are. And he's trying to create, Victor Frankenstein, this perfect human out of what he considers are the perfect body type. But altogether it doesn't work. It's not an organic, natural thing. It doesn't work when it's put together. I could talk about this book all day. I think you can probably tell. I think there are so many different themes. There have been so many documentaries, so many films, so many plays, so many essays, so many scholars have spoken about this book, and it has stood the test of time. It came out in 1880 and we are still talking about it, and there are still films of adaptations of this book, and people are still reading this book, and I think that proves in itself that it is a fantastic book, that it has stood the test of time. So thank you very much for watching. I am gonna carry on with my favourite book series, of course. I will have a new guest on the series very soon. I hope you liked the first episode. If you did, then go and check that out. I'll link it down below, and you could comment down there and tell me if you liked that episode or not, and I will see you again soon.